So your business is leaking. You don't know exactly from what department though. It could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be advertising. Well, over the next 6 minutes, we're gonna break down exactly how it is that you can find the bottleneck in your business and ultimately how you can set up a plan in order for you to make that bottleneck completely disappear. There's two things that you should always have an awareness of as the business owner. The first one is going to be the numbers, and the second one is going to be the narrative. The numbers are gonna give you an understanding as to where people in the process are dropping off. The narrative is gonna help tie things together from the experience as the business owner. All of these things are gonna help you to understand exactly what is happening and why it's happening. Any lead that comes into your business is gonna follow one of these 6 steps in the pipeline. The first one is gonna be being aware. The second step is going to be clicking on the ad. The third step is going to be them actually becoming a lead. The fourth step is them being booked. The fifth step is them actually showing up. And then the last step is them being closed, okay? So in this process, we have numbers at each stage of the process, which give us an indication as to where the bottleneck is happening. Where is the lowest percentage that's happening? So let's just say that, for example, you have 1,000 impressions. You have 10% of people who click on these impressions. Of those 10% of people who click on those impressions, let's just say that, for example, you have 20 leads. From those 20 leads of people, you have, for example, 5 of them that booked. Then, for example, you have 1 of them that showed up, and you have 0 of them that closed. So let's just assume that we spent $100, and that $100 got us 1,000 impressions. That 1,000 impressions got us 100 clicks, that led to 20 leads, 5 book calls, 1 show up, and then a close rate of 0. Now, if we take the awareness and divide it by the clicks, we actually get what's called the click-through rate. So a click-through rate of 10% is phenomenal. Depending on the industry standard, you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 2%. So your click-through rate is not the problem. So that means you have a good ad. Now let's take, for example, the click and divide it by the lead, right? That would give us our cost per lead, making it $5 cost per lead, which actually isn't too bad either, depending on the industry. Let's take, for example, the amount of leads to the amount of people that booked a call. So that would be 20 leads divided by 5 booked calls, which makes the cost per booked call $20 a cost per booked call. That actually isn't bad either. It's pretty good depending on how much your ticket costs. Let's take, for example, the amount of bookings and divide them by the amount of people who showed up. So if we divide our booking rate by the show up rate, that's what we get, 20% for a show up rate, which actually isn't too bad either. Now let's take the show up rate and divide it by the close rate, which is 1 divided by 0, which makes it 0. Now, take a moment here and pause. What one of these numbers would you look to fix first as the business owner? If your answer was to look at the show up rate, then you would be correct. As a business owner, you should always have an eye for the data. And it's clear that where the bottleneck is actually within our show up rate. Because on this side of the spectrum right here, this is all marketing, okay? And it seems like the marketing team is actually doing a pretty good job. With the limited ad budget of just $100, we're actually getting pretty good results. To get, 5 book calls from $100, and let's just say your ticket price is anywhere from $1,000 and up, you're actually profiting a really good amount on your ad spend. However, the show up rate is the thing that's actually causing us the biggest hurdle, because the close rate right now, having a close rate of 0 closes when you only have 1 sales call, it's actually not terrible. Let's just say that a close rate, a good one, is about 33%, right? For every 3 calls that you take, you should be closing at least 1 of them, right? But this person, this sales call, is only receiving just 1 call. So we can't really give them a fair shot and see if that's what the problem is. So as a business owner, you should be looking at this show up rate in this example and wondering to yourself, why is it that this is happening? Is it, for example, that I have a weak email sequence? Do I have a weak confirmation page? Am I not reminding people to show up for the call via text reminders or emails? What is it that's particularly happening? So what you may be thinking to yourself right now was, wow, that was a pretty easy example, Yusuf. What would you do if it wasn't the show up rate that was the one that was the bottleneck? Well, let's actually use 5 different examples here. Let's assume that we have a click-through rate which is really, really low, something like 0.5%. Let's assume, for example, that we have a cost per lead which is super high, right? Cost per lead is super high, upwards of, $50 to $100. It's a pretty high cost per lead. What about a super low booking rate, for example? So our booking rate is super low. So let's just say a 10% or lower booking rate. And then now let's assume that we have a super low closing rate, okay? Closing rate, something that is below, let's just call it 20%. Let's take it metric by metric and see exactly what we would do in order to turn things around. So in the example of a really low click-through rate, what the data is telling us is that our ad is not resonating with the people on the other side. So what we need to do is actually create more ads. So the one way that you can go about doing this, for example, is having 3 hooks filmed, having 1 body filmed, and then having 2 calls to action. What this now does is it gives you the opportunity to create way more videos from actually 1 filming session. So instead of just testing 1 ad, you're actually testing 6 different ads. This is exactly what you should do. If you have a low click-through rate, I would definitely make sure that I'm filming multiple ads and I'm testing multiple ads at the same time to see which one is performing the best. Now let's assume that you have a super high cost per lead. Why is this happening? Well, the simple reason is because your offer is probably being mismatched. So what I mean by that is that in your ad creative, for example, you could be saying something that's really vague or general. As opposed to saying, make more money online, you should say something along the lines of, make your first $1,000 in the next 10 days. Something like that would find the right person much faster than a very vague promise like making more money online. So in this case, what I would do is tighten up the offer and make the promise more specific. Example number 3, your booking rate is low. So what this probably means is that your call to action either isn't showing up fast enough or it's not clear enough. So what you need to do is reframe your call to action and put multiple throughout the video, whether that be a VSL, whether that be on the ad. You need to make sure that you are giving people a clear call to action and a clear direction to taking a next step. Okay, example number 4, your show up rate is low. What do we need here in order to make this much better? Well, super simple. First and foremost, you need a much better confirmation system. So if you're not sending out any SMS, any emails, then that's definitely going to be a problem. The second thing that you're going to need to do is have an actual confirmation page. After someone books in with you, you need to actually address what it is that they are already thinking. When somebody is looking to sign up with you, they're in scatter mode. After somebody has signed up with you, now they're looking to pretty much have their doubts being answered. And lastly, if the closing rate is low, this could be one of a couple different things. First and foremost, I would implement actual calls with your closer so that way you guys get to go over objections and you guys get to kind of role play more often so that they could be more confident. The second thing that I would do is I would actually take the transcripts from the sales calls and I would actually analyze them to kind of see what are the primary things that people are saying, the main reasons people aren't signing up. And then what I would then do is actually bolster up my confirmation process so that I'm actually addressing these frequently asked questions before people get to the call. The best objections are always handled before the call, and on the call, it's just a decision to see if this person is a good fit or not. So analyze your calls, make sure that you are doing a role play with your sales closer, and then just kind of keep giving your sales closer the opportunity to have more shots on target. The more that they practice, the better that they're going to be at their job. So now that you know exactly how to find your bottleneck, what you should do is take the next hour of your day to map out both the narrative of the business right now and the numbers. And after you have the numbers and the narrative mapped out, take a look at each of those 6 numbers that we talked about and figure out where the drop is happening. Fix your bottleneck and your business is back to smooth sailing. If you enjoyed this video, chances are you're gonna really like this video right here.